In 2007, Yoyogames, the company that had recently been put in charge of Game Maker's development, began running competitions on their website, yoyogames.com. These themed competitions would drum up publicity and popularity for the website while offering Game Maker creators the opportunity to make some real money off of their developed games. After the first winter-themed competition concluded in late 2007, Yoyogames wasted no time kicking off Competition 02, whose theme was Ancient Civilization, and boasted a first prize of $1,000. The first prize went to Ancient Ants Adventure by Red System, but the second place finisher has always had a much more lasting presence in my mind, maybe because of the charming graphics, the humorous premise, or the surprisingly robust mechanics. Or maybe because this has been stuck in my head for 15 years.
Caveman Craig!
Caveman Craig is a 2008 real-time strategy game by Rise and Tim Andrews, aka Parabox Games. When we launch the game, we hear this utterly charming title sound effect and a prehistoric-themed menu. As we begin the game, we are greeted by the never-seen but omnipresent tutorial guy, who explains to us the basic workings of the game. He teaches us to collect and prepare berries and fight dinosaurs by picking up rocks and hurling them at the defenseless green creatures. After murdering them thoroughly enough, he explains how to drag the corpse back to our cave to prepare them, too. The purpose of doing this is to earn Caveman credits, which we start with 3 of. We can then spend these to buy, or as the game puts it, breed, new cavemen, who look exactly like us and have adorable randomly generated names. The 3 occupations available to them are hunters, who fight any incoming enemies and kill dinosaurs, gatherers, who will collect berries and dino corpses and drag them back to the cave, and preparers, who will prep the berries and corpses they receive in order to generate more Caveman credits. It may sound easy to get a fully automated operation running off the backs of these automated laborers, but there's a wrinkle. Before they can perform their assigned tasks, each type of caveman needs a different type of training in order to learn their craft. And this can be quite lengthy and cumbersome to complete, especially as we have to multitask in order to keep the rest of our colony running. Preparers are probably the easiest to train. They just need a certain amount of time watching us prepare dinos and berries in order to get it. You can tell a caveman is gaining knowledge by the brain icon hovering over their head, and when a caveman learns a skill, you hear a grunt of comprehension and an icon appears above their head indicating they've learned the skill. The untrained caveman will follow us around until we've finished teaching them the 2 skills specific to their occupation, at which point they will become independent and carry out the task on their own. As mentioned, the 2 skills for preparers are berry prep and dino prep. Besides waiting for enough dinos to get dragged in, this is quite simple and soon enough they'll be prepping on their own. For gatherers, the skills are the same, one for collecting berries and one for dragging in dino corpses, but they can take a little bit longer as we have to wait for dinos to come along for us to drag back into the cave. As we increase our number of gatherers, this also becomes more difficult as there's an increasing competition from the other gatherers to drag the dino corpses back to camp, and the trainee cavemen don't gain experience from watching other people do it, only Caveman Craig. Finally, to train a hunter, we must throw rocks at their head until they learn to duck, and throw rocks at dinos until they learn to do that too. This can take a lot of waiting around for dinos, as it will often take 3 or 4 of them to finally grasp it, but eventually they grunt understanding. And so we have our starting lineup, a hunter, a gatherer, and a preparer, all working as a well-oiled machine. Though the process is slow, we have enough food prepared to buy more cavemen already. My strategy is always to lead with more hunters, because that tends to be where the bottleneck is in terms of food production. At a certain point, you only need so many people to gather and prep the food, but you'll always need more hunters to both defend the cave and generate more dino corpses to consume. Periodically throughout Caveman Craig, the screen will darken and a rainstorm will blow in. This looks foreboding, but is actually good for us as it causes the berry bushes to grow faster, and doesn't have any overtly detrimental effects, besides me having to turn up the brightness on my computer screen to be able to see anything. As we progress through the game, we will begin to notice that not all cavemen are exactly created equal. Sometimes they'll grasp a skill after just a few attempts, and sometimes you have to hurl rocks at their head for a minute straight, and they still won't figure out how to duck. As we increase our number of hunters, another issue also begins to emerge. That being, the rest of the hunters murdering a dino before we get the chance to train the new guy. This makes a large part of the early game consist of racing our own guys to try and get a few hits in on the newest dino arrivals, and this will remain an issue until we get a perk later on that I presume was added in because the testers ran into this exact issue. So now we have a few hunters, we should be good, right? I mean, it's not like those green dinosaurs actually hurt anybody, so we should be able to kick back and wait for the credits to roll and we're living on easy. Oh god, help me, someone please help me! The first actual threat we're introduced to in Caveman Craig are velociraptors, and they're pretty intimidating right up front. They move quickly, with large bounding leaps, and pin cavemen to the ground while mauling them. These are clearly based off of the flawed depictions in Jurassic Park, and I'm sorry, is it too much to ask that this game where an identical all-male society of cavemen coexist with dinosaurs have a little scientific accuracy? Anyway, if we get caught in the jaws of the creature, we have to spam space to escape, and man, I remember this actually being really annoying and hard as a kid. I had no problem with it now, though. I guess the hundreds of hours spent honing my skills in Waffle's Adventure 2 Bunsen Burner minigame have finally paid off for something. After playing for a while and training a few more cavemen, Tutorial Guy pops back up and tells us that since we've been doing so good, he's granted us an entire hedge of berry bushes outside our cave, which in my mind raises an important question. Is he God? Is he a genie? Why don't we ever see him but hear his voice in our head constantly? Is he just an imagined rambling of our haunted psyche? I think the answer, as with many such questions, is who cares? I actually think having the tutorial guy pop up from time to time to give us a gift like this really helps with the sense of progression, and many of these items will help streamline the running of our cave permanently, like this one that gives us a spit to automatically roast one green dino at a time, making our preparers more efficient. I think these lend the game a really nice sense of progression, and later on when we stop receiving them, it'll sort of signal the point where the game is stagnated and loses a lot of its fun factor in my opinion. That's still quite far away though, and we continue going about our little tasks, helping the gatherers, preparers, and hunters, all while training new recruits whenever we can get them. The save system in Caveman Craig is kind of interesting. You're allowed to save whenever you want, but once you do, there's a 100-second cooldown until you can do it again. This number was chosen for a very specific reason that I'll cover in a little while, but I do think it's a good system, striking a good balance between the freedom to save whenever you want, while making the system difficult to abuse. After gaining enough hunters, we are finally granted a means to stop racing our own guys to dinosaurs, that being a target at the entry of our cave. By throwing rocks at the target, we can train new hunters without having to wait for dinos, or compete with our own people to land hits on them. It does take several more hits on average to train the cavemen on this thing than on real dinos, but it's a small price to pay. Whenever I use this, I make it a game to try and train attack and defense at the same time. My preferred strategy is to position the trainee just behind me so when I hit the target and the rock bounces off, it will also hit them in the head, therefore training both skills at once. The throughput of dead dinos into the cave and the position of the target also reveals a slightly annoying bug that actually bothers me a lot. So the code checking whether we should start dragging a dino body supersedes the code to pick up a rock, meaning that whenever we try to pick up a rock as a gatherer is dragging a dino past us, we still bend down, but the little picking up a rock bar doesn't fill until the corpse is clear. This will come back to bite us often in the heat of battle when we need to be loading rocks as fast as possible, and then the game is like, pick up that corpse, I guess. Anyway, now we can train hunters so easily, we should be leaving on, oh god, help, I'm dying! After learning to deal with raptors pretty effectively, the next novel threat we encounter is the fierce Triceratops, who, while being a herbivore, is really not happy with these little fleshy things getting in its way, and will not hesitate to throw our people several yards onto the ground. It can take quite a few hits before he goes down as well, and perhaps more infuriatingly, the corpse is too big for the caveman to drag, meaning that all the delicious meat goes to waste rotting away on the ground. Grocery stores. Another challenge that begins to crop up around this time is enemy cavemen. These will appear in small raiding parties, at least at first, and look identical to our cavemen but dressed all goth. These enemy tribes aren't too difficult to defeat at first, but over time their size will grow, I believe boundlessly, so don't dismiss them too quickly. Regrettably, we also can't eat these guys. Finally, after building our hunter core and getting enough gatherers and preparers to balance out the flow of our food into the cave, the omnipotent tutorial guy speaks to our mind once more to warn us of the greatest threat, the T-Rex warning. From this point, we have 100 seconds to make preparations before the king of the dinosaurs arrives to eat everything within reach. As you may have also put together, I'm like 99% sure that the 100-second timeout on the save is set that specific length so that you can only save one time in the lead up to a T-Rex attack, which I think makes mechanical sense, but is interesting to take note of nevertheless. The game doesn't offer many mechanical options to prepare for the attack. We can't create fortifications, for example, so the only thing we can really do is train any more hunters we can get before the time is up. Or at least this would be true, but as it turns out, gatherers have no self-preservation instinct. No matter how close a T-Rex attack gets, they will all still be at the right end of the screen working on the berry bushes, only to immediately be murked by it when it spawns. So my personal T-Rex attack routine involves patrolling the edge of the screen to get rid of any bushes and corpses there, just so my gatherers don't wander over there and get themselves killed. The game I was playing while writing this script had absolutely no chill, so I had to fight both a Triceratops and an entire colony of enemy caveman between the T-Rex warning and the man himself actually arriving. But eventually, the timer runs out. The T-Rex looms from the screen, moving indomitably forward and devouring all before him. Luckily, he's very slow, and as long as you and your people stay clear of his jaw's attack zone, it's pretty quick work to take him down. Like the Triceratops, there's no moving this corpse, so the decaying wreck is left as a reminder of all that we've overcome. And that's it. Okay, that's not it, but it is the beginning of the late game issues that plague Caveman Craig. This is an issue that actually affects many RTS games that involve gathering resources, and having done no research on it whatsoever, I've decided to call it the two-curve problem. Imagine that the amount of resources you can gather per unit of time is a graphed curve. When you start, it takes a long time to get any one resource because you have to do it all yourself. But as you get more caveman credits and the work is outsourced, the resource per time curve shoots upwards. Now imagine another curve I'll call cost of thing. This is a bit more nebulous since it's not a rate over time, but bear with me. Cost of thing represents all the things you can buy in the game arranged from cheapest to most expensive. Looking at these two lines together, you theoretically want them to look pretty similar, right? Like, as your income increases exponentially, you want your costs to scale with that, so late game items should take a similar amount of time to earn the money for as early game items. You can have a steeper cost of thing curve if you want the late game to take more grinding or time between big purchases as well, but what you don't want is to have the resource per time outstrip the cost of thing curve, at least not until the very late game. If this happens, then after hitting a certain point, buying even the highest level things becomes trivial, and resource per time only keeps going up, making the game essentially become exponentially easier over time. If we apply this theory to Caveman Craig, the problem becomes apparent. The resource per time curve is pretty standard. As we get more cavemen, it takes less time to get resources. But the problem is the cost of thing is flat. It always costs 1 credit to get 1 caveman, and this never changes. There aren't more advanced cavemen that cost 2 or 5 or 100 credits. There's never an incentive to save up for anything, and therefore when you get enough cavemen that you can easily defeat the biggest single enemy in the game, it becomes essentially trivial. Even as the difficulty increases further, which it does through more frequent dino attacks and bigger raiding parties of enemy cavemen, you can't do anything to overcome that difficulty besides buying and training more hunters, and that quickly becomes dull. But we're not quite there yet, so let's finish our game. The next gift we get from Tutorial Guy is a big statue of ourselves outside the cave, which stops predators from entering to kill our preparers. I'll be honest, this never actually happened to me anyway, but I guess it's appreciated. Finally, at 31 cavemen, we get one of each fully trained preparer, hunter, and gatherer. After that, the game falls into a tired cycle of dinos, enemy cavemen, and T-Rex attacks, all while training new guys to replace the ones we've lost, and slowly growing the tribe. At 40 total people, we unlock a minigame where we play as a raptor that can murder cavemen, which isn't much, but it's a fun distraction. At 50 people, the lag starts to really hit the game hard, especially during enemy caveman attacks, and it also becomes harder to pick up rocks at this point, for all the reasons I went over earlier. I also think bushes stopped growing around this point, or at least my horde of gatherers demolished them before they got a chance to grow. Eventually, you die, or get bored, and the game ends. We are greeted with a board of statistics, and then we close the game. A little bit sad that there isn't more to... Oh, huh. So yeah, I can't find anywhere to buy this on the internet anymore. Eventually I did manage to track down an old download on a shady mirror site. Honestly, shout out to shady mirror sites, my job would be way harder without them. The special edition is fundamentally the same as the original, but with several quality of life improvements and a significant difficulty boost. It introduces some new content, such as a new dinosaur type, but if you're looking for some vast expansion on the scope and complexity of the original game, the special edition is going to be the wrong place. If you want to know the right place, in 2015, Parabox Games released Caveman Craig 2, The Tribes of Boggdrop for Steam, which it appears was later renamed to just Caveman Craig, at least in some materials. This version presents updated graphics, more dinos, more mechanics, and an original soundtrack by Ricky Garcia, and though I haven't picked it up yet, it looks absolutely great, and I'll be linking that in the description. At the end of the day, Caveman Craig is a lot of fun for what it is. The balance kind of goes off the rails after you get about 30 workers, but when you're in the sweet spot, it's a lot of fun, and has an undeniable humor to it. The graphics are well polished and animated, and the sounds are very entertaining, especially, well, you know. From what I've seen of it, the sequel looks to be an improvement in every way, so if you want to support Parabox Games, go pick that up, it's only a few bucks. The link to the original Caveman Craig and the sequel are in the description. And as always,
Caveman Craig!